Hi everyone, this is Julie Bruns. Welcome to the Peace and Possibilities podcast. I want you to thrive and be happy, peaceful, and content, no matter where you are on your journey. This podcast shares stories that will show you how it can be done, no matter what your circumstances. You'll be inspired and come away with a new spark of an idea. Never forget, anything is possible. New episodes are released every Wednesday. Subscribe, rate us, and leave us a review. This helps others find our content and get happier sooner. To possibility and beyond. Okay, welcome everyone to this episode of the Peace and Possibilities podcast. My guest today is Catherine Brown. And Catherine is the founder of the company Extra Bold Sales. And she's going to tell us a little bit more about that. Catherine and I met in a LinkedIn course that we were taking together in the last couple of months. And I reached out and said, I have a podcast. If anyone wants to come on and talk about it, all they have to do is love the work they do. That's the only prerequisite. And she said, I love what I do. I'd love to come talk about it. So the whole point of this podcast is to share stories with people just like you, so that everyone listening and around the planet knows, oh, I don't have to be miserable just because I'm working every day. And it's not supposed to be that way. And so the more people we can see doing just that, the more proof we have of it. And then it's out there, and then people are more hopeful. So that's my whole intention.
I love that. I love the theme of it. I do think I see possibility in all kinds of unusual things. And so I love the topic.
Good. Okay, so let's start off with what you do. So tell people what you do now. And I'm really curious to know, because I don't know this, is what you're doing now what you set out to do? Did you always know you're going to be a business owner? And did you always were you good with marketing and sales, or were you just kind of stumbled upon it and now you're an expert at it?
Thank you. Okay, so I thought I was going to be a professional musician.
Oh, wow.
When I was 10 years old, my mother's grandmother died, and they had this antique piano, which I now know was not a very high quality piano, but it was in the family.
Yeah.
They had that sent to us. And so I started on piano lessons. And when I got to middle school, you have to pick an extracurricular to be in with your electives. And I picked band because I already played piano well. And I realized I could go play all the percussion instruments.
Yes.
And that they look like a piano. So I was like, I bet I could do that. Turned out I had a good sense of rhythm. And so from seventh grade all the way through getting my bachelor's degree in college, I actually thought I was going to be an orchestral percussionist. That was my goal. Was to be a percussionist. So I picked my college based on that. I thought I was going to be a professional musician. And I love that I did that, because I got to travel the world. The high school youth orchestra that I was in, it was citywide. We went to Eastern Europe, toured one summer. Every summer during high school and every summer during college, I was at a music festival. Sometimes they were only 1 week long. Sometimes they were 2 months long. Okay. But I traveled the continental United States for these different things. So it just was a very expansive, growing opportunity, even though I ended up not doing that professionally.
Tell me was it piano and something else, or tell me the instruments you played?
Well, so I started on piano, but then when I got into band, all of the keyboards in the back that are back there with all the fun looking toys with the drums, you have the xylophone, the marimba, the orchestral bells you actually play with mallets, and they're all a piano keyboard. And so, when everyone else sounds terrible in seventh grade, I came in, and once I learned to hold the sticks right, I was really good, really fast, because I already played piano.
Okay.
And it's literally the same keyboard. You just strike the note instead of with your fingers.
Okay.
So I had a good sense of rhythm. Of course, I played the snare drum and the symphony and all the other stuff too. But I just transitioned straight to all of that stuff in the back of the band, or in marching band, you're in the front in the pit.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I was in band too. I played the trombone actually from 4th grade to 8th grade. I was first chair. I was only girl in the. It was fun. But then I got to high school, and I was like, I want to be a cheerleader. I don't really want to play the instrument. So superficial, and I should have just kept doing it because it was cool to be able to do it. But I was like, I didn't want to lug it around. And I'm looking back, it was so silly just to give it up. But yeah.
I just couldn't jump and do enough gymnastics to be a cheerleader. So I stuck with, music, but also I went to a big super 5A high school in Texas. And even though it was still cooler to be a cheerleader, It was relatively cool to be in band because the football team was such a big deal that the
Yeah.
whole community was around it. So we always traveled with the team, and we would go, I mean, at least to quarterfinals for all of Texas
That's fun.
every year. And so, I mean, you go all the way up till winter holiday break, you're still playing football because if
Yeah.
you did, you advance all the way to the finals. And so this is a big part of life growing up.
Yeah.
But to your question, I definitely didn't also always think I would do it. The other reason is that I kind of joke about this, but have a brief story about it if it's okay.
Yeah.
My parents, neither of them had any corporate business experience. They both had trade jobs. They were paid hourly. They just didn't know corporate titles. They didn't know anything about how to pursue professional sales or
Okay.
even, accounting or finance or some of these other roles. It just wasn't something they knew about.
Yeah.
In fact, sales was kind of a bad word. I think that my mom was like a lot of people. I think she wanted to spare me, and she had all these perceptions of what selling meant
Yeah.
and what it was and wasn't. And so now that you know about my band experience, we always had fundraisers that we had to do.
Yeah.
And in middle school, one of our big fundraisers that would pay for things for trips and summer and special equipment and things like that was we sold candy that presumably people would, turn around and give away for Halloween. So it was really, really marked up, right? But that's what you would sell. And my mother, like every year, she would just be mad because she didn't want to take it to work. She didn't like when other people brought their kids' fundraisers to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she wouldn't let me bring it to family, and she wouldn't let me ask the neighbors.
Oh.
Because her words were, we don't want to bother them. That would be an imposition. That would be inappropriate, and that will trouble them. And I think it literally never crossed her mind that someone else might see that as an opportunity to be supportive.
Yeah. Yeah. And like excited to support you, and hey, we need it anyways. Let's just buy it from you. Yeah. Yeah. She was just
she just couldn't see it that way. And it was just kind of about just sort of this tunnel vision of this certain way. And so it was I look back and I think how funny it is that I ended up falling into this profession because, and she ended up being proud of me, and it was not a big deal, but he doesn't know that even at such a young age, she was communicating, this is appropriate and this isn't appropriate. And it was demonstrating her own view of what selling meant.
Yeah. Based on her fears and her, Interesting.
Exactly. And so we kind of kid that it's not a 5-letter word, it's a 4-letter word, because it was, considered really taboo. And so what's funny is she would buy all the candy. I mean, she wouldn't let me show up not having done the fundraiser because that would put me not in good stead.
Disadvantage,
with the band director, right? So she would buy it all and just write the check, and then it would sit in our vegetable drawer of our refrigerator forever until we ate it all, or we would throw it away because now Christmas candy came or whatever. So it just is that tells you both about my diet growing up as well as my mother's impression of sales.
So did you end up studying? So when did you make the transition? So you played, you were a musician all the way through high school and college. Did you think you were going to do that? Okay.
Professionally, I went to a university, but I picked one that had a very strong school of music. And I didn't choose to go to conservatory because my parents wisely said, just in the unlikely but possible event that you don't go this route, we'd like you to have a bachelor's degree that has some other courses associated that is a little bit more well-rounded, just in case you change your mind. And when I was 17 and 18 and applying, I was very offended by this notion because I thought that meant that they were not taking me seriously and they didn't think I thought I could make it.
Yeah.
And about the age of 21, if I graduated when I was 22, about the age of 21, I started to think, I could do this, but I don't want to do this. And what am I going to do? And I literally hardly had any other work experience because all of my summers had been going to study under this certain teacher, going to this certain camp. There's kind of this pecking order of if you are working toward being in a professional orchestra, you want to do this festival first and then this one. And if you're really good, then you go to Tanglewood, then you go to this.
So that's the only experiences you had were music related. Yeah.
Mostly, I mean, a little bit of odd jobs here and there, but mostly.
Yeah.
And so when I realized I didn't want to do this professionally, I was super scared to tell my teacher because in my particular area, because you did trombone, I mean, a studio each year only takes a certain number of students. And so the year I came in as a percussionist, they only took 2 students in the whole music school for percussion.
Oh, wow.
And so all the teachers are very invested in the outcome of this student becoming a celebrity in their own right, because that reflects well back on them.
Of course.
Right. And so I was super scared to tell my teacher. I also was scared to tell my parents. I didn't want to disappoint them.
Right.
But I just had this like internal awakening, and I realized that I was not interested in doing what it was going to take to actually become a professional, because it's very competitive. And I just started, that was like early days of me realizing just how am I made up? What am I great at? What do I love? What gives me energy?
Yeah.
And I did practice for hours a day, but I was kind of making myself do that after a while. And I would do that sort of as a reward for something else I might want to do.
Yeah.
You know, and I would play these mental games, and I would hear of people who just got lost while they were practicing. And I thought, that never happens to me. I'm always aware that I've been here 2 hours. And just accomplishing goals, like knocking it out. And, you know, I was very deliberate and very determined. So I did it, but it was not easy for me in the way that I now see other things can feel easy for you.
Yes. Good. Well, it's good that you learned that at 21. I was similar to you, where I would, I figured I learned things very quickly too. So even like at 17, going off to college, like right when I was advertising art, and I said to my dad, I don't know about this major. And he's like, well, that's why you're there. And I'm like, no, Dad. They have an incredible talent. Like they're the same age, or some are just a couple, but what they did was nowhere near what I could even create. I'm like, and I'm going to be competing with them for jobs in 4 years. Like, this is not the right thing for me. I'm good at it, but I'm not like wow at it. And it's
right. And I realized that I just didn't care enough. Like, it isn't that I loved making music, and it's so important to me. And I loved all the things about the creativity and the joy it brings other people. I like to perform. I liked to learn to control my own emotions and not be run away with fear. I liked interacting with the crowd from the stage. I enjoyed all that. But I literally, the way you get an orchestra job is that you have these excerpts from different pieces, and you memorize. I mean, you can have your sheet music, but usually you end up memorizing because you practice it so much. But you'll have, you know, maybe anywhere from 5 measures to 5 lines of certain parts of pieces. And you're sitting behind a screen, and you have to play it, and you have to execute every time perfect. And I realized, I thought, I just don't care if it's perfect.
Yeah. That's an awesome, like I don't care, because if you don't, then you could still do all the work, but it's really not going to be, it's not going to turn out the way you want it to turn out, because your heart's really not in it. You don't care.
It just was like almost good enough, and very, very, very good.
Yeah.
That level of detail, like very, very good, was good enough for me.
Yeah.
And I felt embarrassed about that for a long time.
Oh.
Like I was less than, or like, why was I not willing to do what it took? And then I realized over time, oh my gosh, there are all kinds of people out there where having something be perfect is super important. So if someone's building your bridge, you know, you want the engineer to really care about that being exactly right? Yes. But I'm not that person.
Yeah.
I'm not that person. Like I'm happy to launch a course and have it be really, really good, but it's going to get better after I get feedback from the first group. So I just say, thanks for being the founder. And they know that it's going to get better, you know, and that's totally fine with me. I want that input. And I feel like that adage of don't let, what is it? Don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Something like that. Yeah. It's such an important message.
Mm-hmm. I kind of live by that. Like I can do a good job, and it can be a very good job, but that level of detail is actually a trait required of those kinds of professionals. And it just wasn't for me.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a great lesson for young people to get and like internalize, because it really doesn't have to be perfect. Like the engineer creating that bridge or that building and that you're living in or whatever, you want it to be perfect, but there's things that don't need to be, and you don't need to kill yourself. Okay. So now you're doing this, so you do courses on selling, and you teach people how to sell, and how did you go from, so we're already Yeah. How did you get from like, I think I'll do this instead. So you have this business degree and you're like, did you always sell or in
Right,
like,
but so I just got a music degree, right? I mean, I
yeah.
didn't get a
Okay.
business degree. So I had a Bachelor of Arts in music. I didn't do my last senior recital, which would have given me a Bachelor of Music Performance. I got a
Oh,
BA.
okay.
Fine, I was happy with that. That's fine
Right.
with me. So I got a BA, and what happened is I actually married my longtime gazillion-year husband. Now I actually met in college,
Okay.
so I married right out of college and switched towns, followed him for graduate school, and I started temping.
Okay.
And this is, I know there are still temp agencies, but the whole gig economy is different. Everything's
Yeah.
different now, but people really would, you go sign up with these temp agencies and they would place you places,
Yes.
and you might be typing one day one place or do something another, And so what happened is I had a lot of temp jobs the summer after I graduated, and I was interviewing all the time for different jobs, and I literally didn't know what jobs meant. Like I would read the description and I would think, oh, I'll give that a try. And I look back and I think, I'm so glad I didn't get some of those positions because I didn't know what they were. I didn't know what they meant, But what happened literally is I just had this sort of awakening moment during one of my interviews, and I was looking across the table, a person interviewing me, and I thought, that's someone's job. They get to interview people all day long.
Yes.
And I came home to my newlywed husband at the time and I said, I think that's what a recruiter is. I think I could do that.
Yeah.
And so then that helped me start focusing. I still took everything under the sun to make the bills, to meet the bills that summer.
Yeah.
But I started really narrowing my focus on looking for entry level recruiting positions.
Okay.
So I thought I can get someone to teach me how to do this, because I thought I can sit across the table and learn what to ask and learn what's important. And I get to meet all kinds of people and, just pretty extroverted, high sociability. I was like, I can do that.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. I sent a resume in from an ad in the paper. It was still a regular newspaper.
I remember those days. Yep.
And I was partway through this phone call that came during dinner. And I literally am just chatting with him. And I'm halfway through the phone call and I realized, I think this is the job interview. And I hadn't realized I was being interviewed. I was being interviewed on the phone right then. That was like a screening interview. And so I ended up getting into a whole field of business to business recruitment.
Oh no, you froze. Hold on.
About programming languages and all kinds of tech stuff, and this was mid-90s, and so I got to ride the tech bubble of and be trained and sell consulting services around all kinds of programming languages and packages and things like that. And so I had about a 6-year stint of being an employee for other people, and I loved that. I was a recruiter and then an account manager for sales. And then I decided I wanted to be self-employed. And I thought, what do I know how to do that people will pay me to do? And my next long stint was that I was a professional cold caller, because I realized people will pay you to do this for them because that's how much they hate it.
Right. Yes. Yes.
So that specifically generating leads and that part of selling, it isn't that I love cold calling. I mean, there's not many people who really, really, really love it. It's just that I kind of had developed the internal self-talk and the tools and the know-how to manage myself, overcome the fear, and do it anyway. And people will pay a really good rate for having contract labor do that. And so that next business, my first business I founded, at the high point, I had about 30 contractors working for me. And I would deploy teams of people and we would represent other companies and help generate business for them. And it was awesome. I mean, I learned a lot about all different kinds of businesses through that. And is that first part of the sales process where you're gathering intel and then doing basic qualifying and setting up the meeting. I did that part for a long time and I really enjoyed that.
Wow, that's so cool. Yeah, you're right. There's always there's people that love different things about sales, and there's people that are comfortable, like my husband's in sales and he's like, you have to think of it this way, and it's like it really is like your mindset around it. Like you said, you have to get on the phone and the self-talk and how are you approaching it, and what is the other person feeling on the other side. So it's cool that you're putting that positive spin on it, because it's benefiting you. What you have is going to benefit someone, right? I mean, and everyone needs to be told about it, right?
Exactly. And you kind of learn pretty quickly how to get them to stay on the phone. I don't mean that in a coercive way, but what I was learning at the same time that I didn't realize I was learning is that I was really learning the marketing language that had to go along with something. Because if you start pitching and talking about yourself, especially if it's something technical, if you talk about the technical aspects of it and you're very feature and focus on the product stuff, then that is not capturing the mind and heart of the other person.
Yeah, you lose them.
You do. And so you had pretty quickly to build a rapport and to say, I'm calling you because companies like blah, blah, and blah say they have the following problems. Is that also true for you? Would you like to talk about that? And you have to either paint a picture of hope of how something could be different because of your product or service, or you have to address a fairly acute need. And you have to get at it really quick. And we just got good at that. And so I did that for a number of years. And then after a while, the way I got to my current firm is that after a while, I realized that even though we were giving leads to people and setting up these great meetings, a lot of times the client still wasn't able to close the sale. And I started to see patterns about what I thought was happening. And it was really terrible, Julie, because it was a risk to me, because if I book all these meetings for you, but you don't end up closing the work, you're going to look back at me and say, well, that was a marketing expense that didn't work. Right. Smart. And so sometimes projects would end and it wasn't our fault, like they couldn't close the work, or they didn't have a good follow through process. They had a bad tracking system or whatever the problems were. So that really set me on the next part of my career. It set me on a path of saying, what is happening that we're teeing these things up? And it's not to say every one of them was perfect. I'm not saying that, but in general, clients had an opportunity to say that they didn't think something was well qualified. So I was very generous about making sure there was alignment and agreement, and I wasn't trying to push things on them that weren't a good fit. And so in general, we had consensus that, that was a good lead. And so it's like, okay, it's a good lead, and you said you were paying us to get you these leads, and then you would take them, they're not closing. So what does that mean? What does that mean? What do we do about that? And that really launched me. So for the last 3 years, I've been focused on figuring out what are the things about sales that people need to do differently. I've written some curriculum around that. And then I have classes that I teach, as well as coaching I do around this principle, saying what is happening that you are not taking the ball across the finish line, and helping people figure that out.
So you saw a problem, and then you helped create a solution for it. You were like, it was smart. You connected the dots and said, okay, this isn't landing the way it was supposed to, or the outcome wasn't what it's supposed to be. Like, how can I help? So it's brilliant for anyone out there that is considering, like, either whether you're younger and just graduated college, or you want to have your own business. It's almost always creating a solution to a problem that already exists. Brilliant, right? And if you have the tools and the skills to do it, you can help other people solve problems. So it's like, it's very, I mean, there's lots of books written on this topic, but it's not something I don't remember even learning it that way. And I have a marketing degree. I have a bachelor's in marketing, actually, and I don't remember it being that simplified for us.
Right.
Problem. And if people thought about it, almost you have to sell in almost any aspect of business.
Exactly. And then whatever your own spin on it is, that's the marketing part, right? Is that I think I read several years ago, but when I read Russell Brunson's first book, I don't know if you read Marketing Secrets. He's the founder of ClickFunnels, and his first book, Marketing Secrets, he has a formula in there, and I won't be quoting it exactly perfectly, but he talks about how there's this space between, like, the most obvious existing solution and then something that's super crazy. So he gives a diet example. So he said, so super crazy would be if you look at the sun, you lose weight, right? That would be crazy, right? But then the boring path over here is calorie counting. So what is somewhere between the two of totally crazy and the accepted norm, somewhere all the space in there is space for innovation. And so he talks about bulletproof coffee. He talks about all kinds of paths that people have created whole companies and solutions around, and they were a little bit unusual. They were a little bit different, maybe a little, quote, crazy, and unconventional, but they worked.
Right.
and I have to work, right?
Yeah,
But there's all this freedom between the most traditional way and looking at the sun and thinking it'll make you lose weight, right? And
that's awesome. That's a great way to put it.
isn't that useful? Yeah, that
Yeah.
was very helpful to me to think there's lots of sales training out there. So what's unique
Yes.
about this? And that really makes me always be looking for that and thinking about that and trying to communicate.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's a great mindset to have around it. So let's talk about what would you have for, so talk to that person that's 21 and just finishing school and they know that they aren't in the right, what can they do differently? Or they're about to start college and they think they want to do this, but they're another part of them, their brain is telling them to go after something else. Like, what would you say trying to find a meaningful career in their lives? Maybe they're 35 and they just quit a job or they just got laid off and that's really not what they want to do anyways. What would you say to those people?
Right. So my basic assumption is that they're in the Western world and they have lots of choices, right? That's our presupposition is that a person has, because it is really a privilege to be able, like our podcast, who this is going to, who the audience is like, it's just to be able to be introspective and be working on personal development and anything about self-help is such a privilege because we weren't born into a position where we just have to do what our parents did.
Right.
Such a privilege. I mean, I really do think about that all the time. And that's part of helping people sell better is realizing this is something that is going to make a difference in the life of the customer. That's the right customer for you. And so because of that has honor and dignity. And you don't need to be embarrassed about being in sales because a lot of people are actually embarrassed about that. So that's part of how you overcome some of the negative self-talk that will propel you to be bolder when you are prospecting or closing or following up or asking for the deal or, whatever it is. So, so I really appreciate that we have the privilege of being able to ask. And I think that I really would say that you want to do all kinds of things that enable you to just practice, keep growing, pay attention to what's giving you energy and pay attention to what feels harder. And I'm so excited that I feel like in the world of more contractors, the gig economy, crowdsourcing, all the ways that professionals are expanding and what's being considered viable work now, I think it's so neat that you can invent things.
Yes.
I just think more and more people will be self-employed or that they will, in a way, have multiple companies or multiple jobs because they'll do this for this person and this for this person. And that might scratch two different itches that they have, and that's not considered unsuccessful or that's not bad. I think that's very interesting how it feels like culturally it's becoming okay to pivot more, change jobs more, and be exploring that more.
Yeah, and have more going on at the same time and not just like you were saying, they're doing two different things for two different companies, but they're still using their strengths. I was talking to someone earlier today and we're talking about that quote that in 5 years, half of the jobs that exist aren't even invented yet or something. I forget I don't know exactly, but I have read it in something else too. So someone else was saying it and I'm like, I'm not sure about the exact number, but I do know that's been talked about. It's like, so there's so much to invent and explore and dream up and innovate that keep doing all that, right?
Right. And that's making me think too, Julie, like another piece of advice I think would be that you do want to pay attention to those 5 people around you that you spend the most time with. Because if you're very thoughtful about your environment of who is speaking into your life and giving you input, then you can turn to them. If they're trustworthy, positive people who really care about knowing you, you can look at people periodically and say, what am I really good at that is unique? And so I have a friend, for example, who started a college admissions coaching business. She was a great writer. She loves the detail of actually figuring out the financial aid process and all that stuff. You can imagine, I already told you I didn't want to practice 8 hours a day, so this would not be a good job for me. Wow. But she thrives in mastering the processes and helping people with that. And she invented a college admissions consulting business because she was doing it as a favor for people. Over time realized I am really good at this. And I and a number of other people were saying, you are really good at this. People will pay great money for this. You would be awesome. You should grow this thing. And she has just more work than she knows what to do with, because people want to pay someone to be a guide and help them not screw this up, because it's actually pretty complicated, especially applying for college during pandemic.
Yep. That's awesome. Yeah. Another example of creating a solution to solve a problem. And I've been there because my kids are one's 18, one's 23, but same thing. It's like all of the stuff that you don't know about when you're applying and helping them, and no one ever tells you. And it's like, my husband we were joking about that. Like, we should write a book. Well, there are plenty of books, but who's got time to go read all the books about the stuff that you have to do, because you have to spend all your time filling out all these forms. So
that could be another podcast you could do.
Yeah, there you go. So tell me your final question. So tell me, is there anything that you wish you had learned a little earlier in your life or your career sooner? Is there any piece of wisdom or guidance that you wish you would have had a little bit earlier in your life?
Yes, it would be that I think actually everybody has imposter syndrome a little bit. And weirdly, that's very comforting to me, because when you're in selling, especially if you're young and you're calling on people older than you. So when I was 26, 27, 28, 29, I'm calling on C-level executives in technical companies. They were almost always middle-aged or 60-year-old men. And people would try to coach me, and they would say, Catherine, that CFO puts his pants on, one leg at a time, just like everyone else. They would have all these expressions, and you're like, yeah, probably barely, right? You don't really believe them. And the more, I just had to get older and get more practiced, but the older I got and the more practice I got and the more people shared things with me, the more I realized that even the most seemingly secure and even famous person still struggles with self-doubt and thinks, I hope they don't ask me something and don't know how to answer. And in that way, it's very leveling, because you understand that people are just people. And so you're not as starstruck. You can lean into what it is that that is your unique contribution in this relationship or conversation or whatever. I wish I believed that. I don't know what I could have done differently, but it just took me a while. I think people tried to coach me around it, and I wish I could have caught that even earlier, because I think even in my first business, I think I would have been braver about what business I went after, for myself, or my own financial goals or things I set, because I just would have believed it was more possible. And I think I thought that's for other people, not for me, because I didn't understand that actually most people struggle with those kinds of thoughts.
That's awesome. I'm glad you said that. That's an awesome way to end it, because it's really, if everyone were to realize that every conversation they're having, whether they're 22 or 32 or 62, everyone has that self-doubt, no matter how much they've accomplished, no matter how much experience they have or don't have, everyone has it. And if you can keep remembering that, you can be a little bit bolder, because you won't be intimidated by it. Instead of like, oh, when I have that, it's like, no, you're going to have it at every stage. So just, embrace it.
Yeah, unless you are a narcissist or you're a sociopath. I mean, otherwise everybody else is just a human, right? And in that you have this baseline that are the fears, worries, insecurities. We want the same things. And that is really lovely. And again, when you believe that the product or service that you are offering addresses a little bit of that humanness and helps them get further on the path of where they want to go, then that brings honor to both of you, and that feels really good.
Awesome. Yes, it feels really good. Great way to end it. Oh, thank you so much for all of your insights and wisdom. And it was fun hearing your stories about music and growing up. So I'm glad, because there's so many people that just like decide one thing and think it has to end a certain way. You're living proof that like you could just go to school, get a music degree, and then turn around and create your own company.
It's crazy, isn't it?
So you just never know where things are going to end up. So I just, I appreciate it. And people are going to hear the stories and remember that it's like, it's never a straight line, but if people get stressed about it not being that way, and it's like, if you just expect it not to be that way, then you can be a little less stressed too while you're learning.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Really thanks, Catherine. Where can people get a hold of you if they want to work with you or your courses or?
Thank you. I have a pretty detailed website at Extra Bold Sales, EXTRABOLD, extraboldsales.com. I have services and links to blogs and things like that. That's a great place to start.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll put that in the show notes too so people can get in touch with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Talk to you again.
Have a great night.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening. If you love this content, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you found us on. You can get all my social media links in the description below. Help us keep the momentum going so that every person can live their lives happily, doing work they love.